and they were the final clearings, I think, or the final period of the clearings that were happening in the late, the mid and early and mid 60s, because I think, you know, in the 70s, everyone was, all the Nyoongar mob were pretty much employed and engaged in farming activities by the farmers. So those periods of being out on bush, you know, was really, were really important. I was lucky that I come from a massive family. I've got 10 brothers and sisters myself. My mum has got 8 brothers and sisters. So there's 9 in mum's family and there's 12 in dad's. So we spent a lot of time, and mum and dad were very strong on family connection. All of mum's family lived in Northern, which I guess is why we settled there. You know, the bloke always goes with the woman. But dad's family were mainly in Brookton. And so we spent a lot of time travelling to Brookton. With my 10 brothers and sisters, we were born right across the wheat belt. My oldest sister was born in Corrigan. People were born in Northam and Kellabarron and Quairading, Brookton, Beverley, and Northam, of course, and York. So we spent a lot of time travelling around. I remember a lot of interaction out in the bush. We were always lucky, particularly with the old McGuire, Bennell families, very strong on language, and very strong on culture. So all of my cultural learnings, and those of us, you know, like yourself, David, we spent a lot of time with those old fellas who were very clear and specific about how you behaved around culture. So we learned a lot of protocols, whether it was around being around fire or whether it was just behaving and communicating. I remember getting a whack from an old auntie and Dad's old sisters were big old strong women. And you didn't mess with them. You know, all the old blokes, they loved you because you were a little boy, but the old girls, man, and I remember walking past an old auntie one day. We were that excited to get to Brookton, and of course as kids we just hopped out of the car and went off running. And I ran inside and ran past her, and she grabbed me by the arm and gave me a big whack across the ears. You know, of course I broke down and started crying, and then she was kissing me and cuddling me, saying, "Oh, don't you dare come to my house and walk past me or run past me." So those sort of things, you know, you remember them because then that cause you to reflect and go, well, yeah, okay.
What I was going to say, Oral, you remember those times where you were told, don't go swimming down there at Marley Pool, you know, in Brookton?
Yeah.
Because that's where the old fella was still there. So, you know, you got whacked for specific reasons culturally, whether it's because of there was a sacred site and you weren't allowed to go there as children, or you know, swimming in a pool on a stinking hot day, you know, didn't really help, but get home before the sun went down, those sort of things. But, you know, I can recollect just being outside of Brookton, and the Collard family were big contractors with before the machinery came in and started taking over. But because they had a large family like yours, you know, you can imagine how the families all joined up and worked together, did the clearing of the land. And I can remember outside Brookton, I can, you know, every now and then if I collect, you know, I must have been about, like you said, you know, four or five, and you can smell the raw earth from the trees being knocked down, and I can still remember the trees all being piled up and burnt, you know. So the clearing and all of the land, etc., was undertaken, you know, and so we were there helping to clear the land as Nyoongar people working on contract. A lot of our old people, you know, used to, especially when the First World War came on and they weren't allowed to go off and fight, you know, they had to, even though we know sort of historical records that the farmers' wives were holding the farms up. Well, we know for a fact that it was a lot to do with the Aboriginal workforce that was there, not only to make it sustainable, but also protected them during that time when their husbands were away fighting. So those are sort of stories that you hear from your old people and the connection to country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, and I think, you know, I suppose, you know, for me, and like what you're saying too, I think, you know, spending time with old people is a critical part of learning about country. When you're on country is the best place for it to be taught. So those old fellas taught us cultural protocol. And as we grew, and obviously if you're a good kid, if you're a Dalawa, the old fellas knew that they wouldn't. Dalawa is a kid who misbehaves and is mischievous or naughty.
That was me.
But the old fellas knew, and I think that was, you go back to pre-colonisation, or those sort of social behaviours and the way that social order was organised inside culture was no different whether we were growing up in towns, in houses, or living out in the bush. And my mum, my dad, they were immersed in language and culture as your parents were, DC. And I say that I look at a timeline, and very quickly my kids, through their connection to me, obviously, and then my connection to my mum, who's 86. Mum, as an 86-year-old Nyoongar woman, can cast her mind back to when she was 4 or 5, and she does. And straight away, she immediately connects to a lot of those old fellas who were one-name Nyoongars. Now, one-name Nyoongars were the fellas who didn't have surnames. Yep. And that not one name aspect of identity-wise and history-wise puts those old fellas straight back into pre-colonisation. So there was an old fellow who was connected to both you and I, David, was old Granny Nguia. I mean, that's all we knew him as. I think he ended up with a Wedgela name, and there's a bridge, Tommy Cohen. So it was an Irish, a Jewish name, but he was Nguia. He was known as a
Irish as McGuire.
So his stories, and obviously that cultural teaching and learning came from those old fellas, along with a lot of other old Nyoongars, directly to Mum. Now that knowledge is still shared today, that Mum, about the country, about language, about places, significant places. There's a whole lot of names of our places out this way. There's a whole lot of sacred hills, and the name of the river and the creeks and the waterholes and all of that still have very strong Nyoongar knowledge and whole Nyoongar names that hold the stories. So those places are still evident. We can still go to those places, and we do. My point is that people think that 200 years of colonisation has actually destroyed Nyoongar people's culture and their connection to and their knowledge. But I can tell you now that, and those of you who've been to our place here, where our process is to heal the land. It's regenerative land management. It's I think it's as I've said to Keith and Justin and others, and to Di, this, what we're doing is regenerative land management, meaning that this land, we are setting it up to sustain itself forever again. As long as, my philosophies or, I'm alive, but beyond my life, through my kids and my grandkids, this place will never return to the hands of whitefellas. This is a sacred bit of land, and we're caring for it in using our cultural authority. We're using our sacred knowledge, and those aspects of not only land management, but governance are really critical for us as Nyoongars.
What I was going to say, I just want to take you back too, because on the other side of the family, through the Blurton line, because the Blurton family were actually dropped off. They were born down in Fremantle in Perth, and they were taken up and dropped off at New Norcia Mission. So and as we know, all of those Nyoongars that went there, and especially the old fellow Blurtons that we know through our family line, and there was a big family of Blurtons, as we know, that came from Johnny Blurton, the cricketer, the famous cricketer, New Norcia cricketer. But the values that the Benedictine monks actually passed on to our Noongar people to train them up, to teach them all about farming on the land. How do you think that is actually, part of your, with your aspirations? Do you think that links still to what you're talking about today?
I'd have to say no. I think that, we all grew up on farms. I, spent a lot of time with mates who were obviously from farming families, growing up and obviously living in the wheat belt, growing up in the wheat belt. You tend to do that. You go to people's places for weekends, you go to kids' parties and so on and so on. And Dad Dad and all of, the old uncles, all worked the farms for the farmers, very cheaply, I might add. So I think that I wouldn't say, because I don't consider myself a farmer at all. I'm not a farmer. I don't want to be a farmer. I'm absolutely a Nyoongar land manager, and as I was saying, I have learnt over the 12 years that I've been doing this that managing spirituality and cultural care is the critical aspect for us. Our strength, we have never been trained as agricultural land managers, in terms of, we traditionally, obviously Bruce Pascoe said that we were practicing agriculture, but and we were, there's no question of that. So we are farmers in an agricultural sense, but our old people, I just think the most sustainable practices for anything, including agriculture, comes from sacred knowledge of land management and
culture.
What's that? Sorry.
So they were farming culture.
Absolutely. Sustainable farming is the sustainable management of natural resources, and that's what our old fellas did. There was no. They used storage, and they used, I think, those, the metrics that I think that determines, or determined whether people were practicing agriculture. I think there's about 7 of them, whatever they are. I don't know, but I think that's how Bruce Pascoe got to a point. Well, Nyoongar and Aboriginal people ticked off on 7 of them. They were absolutely farming, the tubers, and they were farming the native grains. So there was a grain belt, as he speaks about in his book, and those tubers, whether it was Yulk or Warring, Aboriginal people were practicing agricultural ways in how they farmed and utilised those resources right across the country.
So, as a land manager, a Nyoongar land manager now based on country, what's your aspirations for investment in our regional industries?
Well, look, it's a massive challenge. It's a great question, and it's a massive challenge, because to me it comes down to values, and not so much values, but value, and how we frame value. Unfortunately, particularly what we're seeing with the NLE work that we're doing is, at the moment, there's very little value. There's a great interest, but there's very little value for sacred knowledge. There's very little value, and I'm talking about value in an economic sense. So no one invests in sacred knowledge. No one that I see is investing. I don't see thousands of dollars or, huge chunks of investment, energy and resource going into Indigenous sacred knowledge or Indigenous cultural authority around land management. And yet, we collectively, as Aboriginal people, we are still the biggest landholders in Australia. I think it's up towards 70% of the Australian landmass is held in the Indigenous land estate. So it's really important for people, and I think for seed impact or impact seed, and impact investment and all of these groups that are social return, all of this stuff that's being discussed around investments, I think really needs to have a focus towards not only the capacity building of Aboriginal people in land management and in agriculture or regenerative ag. I think they're all great industries and sectors for Aboriginal people to be involved in. I'm a big fan of the work that Regen WA are doing, and Ben's work with Wide Open Ag. I think these entities that I'm meeting through these networks over the last few months have been fantastic, and it's a great network to be in. But I think we've got to, if we're going to get serious, my view is, I've been, as you have, Dave, we've been good little blackfellas for a long time. Our old fellas died. I talk about my dad. He died with a broken spirit at 49. So I certainly don't want to die wondering or hoping or wishing. As I said, we joked at the beginning before maybe a few people got online. We haven't divested this place, and I'm not interested in I want to go straight to ownership and control, not because I'm greedy, but because this is the cultural authority that we hold, you as well, David, that we hold as Balladong Nyoongar people over these lands right here, this land, this territory, is absolutely ingrained in the marker trees and the old granite rocks that were marked by our old people 2,000 generations ago. There is nothing that can tell me that any tenure, land title, or level interpretation, legal, Western, whatever, overrides our cultural authority in that regard. So I'm very staunch about that, and I'm getting harder because I'm getting older and more and more impatient with how we get put on merry-go-rounds and told to be good little blackfellas and we'll get to you when we get there. I think if we're going to drive investment, if we're going to participate as blackfellas in investment processes and structures and initiatives, then I think we collectively need to negotiate quite openly and honestly a place for where traditional and cultural authority sits and where sacred knowledge fits in how we collectively care for country.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Conk. I think that's quite comprehensive in explaining the Nyoongar position in regards to this forum. So what we've done now is we've got 5 minutes for questions. Is there any questions out there that you may want to ask Oral or myself at this time?
Kaya, Wadong and Oral, it's Tanya. If no one else has a question, given the framing of the conversation today, I guess, what are your guys' views on investment mechanisms when you've got a lot of theory that investing in Aboriginal organisations or concepts should still be seeking, say, 6 to 7% returns?
Well, again, so this is where value comes into it. I mean, I think, you know, we can talk about economic, you know, values. We can talk about the value in economic terms. We can value it through its scientific evidence, and we can put a value on it based on, you know, markets and demand and all of those sorts of things that drive economics. But as I said, I still don't see where our values and the value for our knowledge or our aspects in terms of what we are very strongly, more and more, starting to bring to the table. So my question is whether it's regenerative ag or whether it's, impact seed. Sorry, seed impact. I keep getting that around the wrong way. I think it's, we're talking, anything that anybody, I guess, a lot of you I've spoken with, anything that anybody is involved in. I guess what I'm saying is I don't want our value, the value that we bring, to be diminished by people's ignorance or lack of understanding. What we're saying is, well, we actually know what that value is, and it was the value that drove our sustainable management. So in terms of sustainability, in terms of clean and green, in terms of the food insecurity issue, that I've learned from talking and working with Keith. If we're in this situation, we're in an environmental, disaster zone in our time, and we've got Nyoongar people who aren't engaged in a whole lot of stuff. I mean, the example is our property here. We generate $28,000 a year. But we've invested and we've actually planted over $1 million worth of trees. So, we've driven things on shoestrings. We've created the value, and our value has attracted, the resources for us to do our caring for country. And these are models that I think prove that, this can be done. The social return, the cultural return, the spiritual well-being of the land, and everybody and anybody that's been here, has shared some magnificent stories with me, through their own personal experience. And that to me is just overwhelmingly clear that we've got to put a value on that. If people, who are completely not connected come and in one visit have a spiritual experience that shifts their spirit and their mind and their soul, geez, that's got to be worth something. And, you know, I don't know how many farmers sitting in tractors, spreading fertilizer and doing all of that stuff. I don't know if their spirit is being moved in similar ways. So, you know, there's some things in our frameworks that I think are overvalued, and there's obviously a whole lot of stuff that's undervalued. And I think we've got to find some balance there to get to a point where, you know, I think what I've been speaking about is Buja first, country first. You know, let's put the land first, not last. Let's put the environment up there, and not only the environment, but everything, the natural systems. Why are we still seeing, you know, at this time of the year, the farmers are driving straight through the creek lines and laying their crops and, you know, spreading their fertilizers and, you know, burning stuff that they shouldn't be, clearing trees. They're still clearing trees. I can't believe it, you know. So, yeah, it goes on and on, Tanya. I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but I think that, you know, there's lots of gaps in the conversation. Yeah.
So, Kaya Moricho, first of all, just to add to what my uncle Oral's saying, along the lines of regenerative investment, you look through all of the documentation, you'll find that culture is still, you know, the quadruple bottom line is still not including culture. We have the triple bottom line, but social, economic, and environment, but we're still trying to grasp hold of that fourth one. So that's something that's a challenge for all of us to be able to address things like, well, how do you put a number on, monetize the value of culture within the discussions we have. So that's just very quickly. But Carolyn has got a question. Such an interesting discussion. Oral, have you spoken with super funds regarding the future fund and the need for farmland to be considered as long-term security for Indigenous communities? This is not about financial return. We need to
deeper than that. Yeah.
We need to get their heads past this. So it's something that Carolyn's looking at is far deeper than that. So
yeah.
You thought about that?
No, I haven't, Carol. I don't know this. That's one of the groups that I haven't had the chance to meet or speak to. But look, I mean, I guess I'm pretty lucky. I don't, you know, this place, I come here to rest and to gather my thoughts and to not be driven by the financial pressures of, you know, having the resources to do things. So we do things as we need. And as we have resources to do it, so it's a wonderful philosophy, because I step out of here, I can tell you, and I'd step into that crazy world again, where you do have to drive stuff. But I think it's these are the conversations, and these are the interesting bits of information, you know, that can help fill the gap. And no better way than on forums like this and in person, and you know, in the way that we can conduct business. In speaking and about these opportunities and sharing information and inspiring each other. I think you know, that's what we've got to do. Country, we're all connected to this land. I mean, there's no question that anybody and everybody that loves Australia and loves, you know, the work they do on it is connected to it. You know, the difference between our mob is that you know, we have the law in a spiritual and cultural way that's so old that is open. So people can connect to us, but our connection is still only a human spiritual connection. It's not superhuman, and anybody can connect to that spirit as humans.
So, Carol, thanks for that. One of the things also, just adding to that, I know that the Southwest Aboriginal Land and Sea Council are also under the impression that they need to actually start acquiring more land as they go forward as well. So looking at super funds might assist that in some sort of way in the future. We don't know, but until that appeal is, you know, being dealt with, September, I think, just for those who are interested, we may have a better way of going forward in regards to acquiring farmland for long-term Indigenous families and being part of this, what we call caring for our country. So any other questions at this stage?
Sorry, just to process one. It's Jamie here, Kaya, Uncle. I'm just wondering, there was so much depth in what you shared just then, and I feel like I only got about 2% of that conversation. Will this recording be available to people so that we can go back through that and listen that again?
I think that's a thumbs up from Daniel. That was Daniel's thumb, not mine. This is mine.
Was that a technical issue, Jamie? Was that the reason why you couldn't hear me, or?
Oh, no, I heard you. I just know that at the same time as hearing you, I was unlearning and learning and unlearning. So
sorry, right.
Yeah,
no, I thought of
so much.
Jamie's like the rest of us. We've got so many things going on in our head at the same time. It's very hard to try and maintain that conversation. So good on you, Jamie. It's good. This has actually been recorded so people can get access to it. So thank you, Daniel, for that thumbs up. Any other questions? Because this is just the intro that we're giving you in regards to the next part of the conversation. But the intro is trying to set that foundation that Nyoongar, you're on Nyoongar country. The Southwest is a very rich country. However, with the first settlers coming here and trying to establish the agricultural business in the wheat belt, for example, down the south coast, what we've seen is there's been a lot of damage being done to the country, a lot of degradation being done. I can remember my dad telling me a story, when they cleared the land, they went to the cocky or the farmer and said, we'll clear this here, leave those trees up on the hill there, that bush on the hill, no, clear them. Or we'll leave these down near the creek line, leave these trees down on the creek line. They go, no. And I know Dad was saying that, he and his father, and they were saying, trying to impress upon the cockies at the time, you still got to have that cultural value, that values of looking after country. We call them green corridors now. We're trying to plant those green corridors back right across our country, aren't we? Trying to rehabilitate that land. But the issue that we see with that malpractice, I suppose, as we say in the agribusiness sector, is that by clearing all that land, the farmer actually turned around and said, the more acres I can clear, the more bushels I make, the more bushels I make, the more pounds I take home to the bank. So that's the sort of thoughts that we had in the past, and we're sort of sharing with you this stuff that because of the way that we've gone about our way of looking after our land in the southwest, we've got a long way to go to try and fix it all up and rehabilitate it. So if we heal the land, we heal our people, don't we? And this is for all those cockies out there on the tractors as well, who are trying to come up with ways of trying to deal with the issues of making their land sustainable, but also productive at the same time. And this now leads me into the next part of our conversation. If there's no more questions, because healing the land is a very important component of what we call regenerating our land.
Can I just say one last thing?
What's that?
Can I say one last thing, and then I'll
yeah.
go into mute. I think this is, I think everything that we do and everything that we're discussing, I think we only have to go out, travel across country, everywhere. Whether it's not just here in WA, it's not just our wheat belt, it's right across the world. In fact, we've got to get our natural systems and our environmental elements, our natural resources. I think Keith, you referred to them as the natural capital. Our natural environments and our natural systems have to, and we are responsible as humans, right? We've got to get some balance back in to the way we utilise land. So we've got too much of the one thing happening, in huge areas. So if you look at the agriculture, you look at the forestry, it's the same problem in a different way. So we need diversity in what people are doing. We've done all the clearing, and then we've got broadacre farming that took over from all of that. We need lots of people planting trees, not because it's about hugging trees and giving up arable land or, cutting your profits. It's actually about saying we need we need trees and vegetation in areas that help the soils, help the natural systems, help the hydrology and the ecology of all of those natural systems. If no one wants to change, then we're all dead. You know, this is the disaster that we've got ahead of us, and we've got to be absolutely truthful and honest in what we're doing. So people have got to start to realise that money is not everything, and everyone's going to die with all the money they've got in the bank. Country will recover. When we're all gone, it'll recover, and we saw a bit of that in the very short time that, you know, since the planes have stopped and the boats have stopped and, you know, the cars had stopped, even when the people stopped, you know, the environment started to recover in that very, very short time. So remember that the environment is the all-powerful thing, and we are but custodians while we're here, and we just got to have some balance. The philosophies of our old people, the Indigenous peoples right across the world, and you and I saw that when we went to New Zealand, DC, and spoke to all those, you know, those families, those nations that we were privileged to have met. The one voice with the Indigenous groups across the world is very, very powerful, and we're all saying the same thing. There's too much of one behaviour. There's too much of one value system or framework, and we've got to mix that up. We've actually got to say, no, let's do this for country. Let's do this for the people. Let's do this for our food, and let's do it for the right reasons if we're going to do this properly. Otherwise, nothing's going to be sustainable with what we're doing, and we're just going to end in disaster. So I just want to finish on that note. Happy note. There is lots of hope. I really like the Common Land 4 pillars. You know, they're 4 returns, 3 zones with a 20 years approach. I think that to me is fantastic, and I know we all know what those guys do, but I just think that what they're proving on a global scale, you know, there's lots of synergy with how we want to all operate, and I think there are people who have got, you know, the financial, the economic, the scientific, and in our case, we bring the spiritual and the cultural. So there are, you know, lots of equality. There's lots of equity. There's lots of opportunity by this collaboration and what we're doing, you know, today, and I know in other forums. That's great. Thank you for your time, folks. Thanks, DC.
Okay, yes, and just to add to that, one of the leaders from Canada, a young guy by the name of Brent Young, actually said, who's part of the Permanent Indigenous Peoples Council, he was the chair at the time, said that the First Nations peoples all over the world are the only people that can save the planet, because no one else seems to want to. Which is a bit sad, because I see just through this forum today that there is people, other people other than First Nations, but I think what he meant to say was that we need to provide that leadership in going forward. So joining up with First Nations peoples is the first critical part of trying to come up with positive solutions to save not only our country where we are, our butcher, but also the planet, because all of those things, whether it's water supply, whether it's enough trees to ensure that our emissions are being decreased, whether it's all to do with trying to ensure that the climate or the temperature doesn't rise any further, allows for, you know, little islands in the Pacific are actually submerged as the sea level rises. These are all implications of, and we've had a very, in Australia, we've had a very quick eye view, haven't we, on the East Coast with the firestorms in recent times, just one classic way. Prior to that, the drought that's going on right through Queensland and New South Wales, but also, as we know, in Western Australia, just in the southwest. 2 weeks ago, the budger out there didn't look too good because the rain hadn't come. And then you go out there now and it's beautiful, it's lovely and green. So it's interesting how we see, you know, these things are so all tied together as one. And as custodians of the country,